The auctioneer's gavel cracked like a gunshot through my office speakers. Sold! A paltry sum for a lifetime's work. My business partners, Marcus and Genevieve, were celebrating on the live feed, toasting their genius. They thought they'd just liquidated my entire priceless collection, the heart of the sterling curio, labeling them as masterful fakes to humiliate me and force me out. They saw me as a ruined man, a relic to be discarded. A slow smile spread across my face as I looked at the temperature-controlled vault behind my desk. They had no idea the real show was just beginning. The fools had sold the bait. Now it was time to set the trap. I watched them on the monitor, a silent predator observing his prey. Marcus was preening, puffing out his chest in a suit that cost more than my first car. He was all brute force and cheap ambition, a man who saw history only as a series of zeros on a balance sheet. He clinked his champagne flute against Genevieve's, a clumsy gesture of triumph. She was the real viper. Her smile was as polished and cold as the gallery's marble floors, her eyes already scanning the crowd for her next mark. She was the artist of our downfall, the one who whispered poison in Marcus's ear. I remembered her words from just last week, her voice a silken blade of false concern. Elias, darling, we're worried this collection is becoming an obsession. It's clouding your judgment. Perhaps it's time to diversify. Diversify. A lovely euphemism for liquidate and run. They saw themselves as the perfect team, the brawn and the brains. They just forgot one crucial detail. I was the architect of the entire damn building. It wasn't always like this. The sterling curio was born from a shared passion in a dusty Cambridge bookshop over a forgotten folio of Piranesi prints. I had the eye, the deep, instinctual knowledge of history's whispers. Marcus had his family's money and a bulldog's tenacity for negotiation. And Genevieve, she had the grace, the silver tongue that could charm a Medici ghost into revealing its secrets. We were a perfect trinity, a three-legged stool of ambition and expertise. Our first major acquisition set the tone, a tarnished silver locket from a flea market in Provence. Marcus saw a quick flip. Genevieve saw a story to spin for a wealthy client. I saw the faint, nearly invisible maker's mark of a Parisian master silversmith thought lost in the revolution. That locket, bought for €50, funded our first year. It also exposed the crack in our foundation. I revered the history, they revered the profit. For a decade we balanced on that fault line. My collection grew, piece by priceless piece. The Romanov Fabergé egg I rescued from a bankrupt estate in Geneva. The matched set of flintlock pistols that belonged to a famed Revolutionary War general. Each item was a child to me, a tangible piece of a story I was sworn to protect. To them, it was inventory. An asset column on a spreadsheet, appreciating in value but infuriatingly illiquid. The change was gradual, a slow poisoning of the well. Whispers in the boardroom when I was away, lunches I wasn't invited to. Then, last year, Marcus cornered me after we'd landed a major consignment. He was flushed with victory and scotch. "Elias," he slurred, clapping a heavy hand on my shoulder, "this is great. But your collection, it's dead money, sitting in that vault. Think of the capital we could free up." That was the moment. The mask didn't just slip, he'd ripped it off and thrown it in my face. I saw the carrion bird in his eyes, hungry for the kill. I looked over at Genevieve, who simply gave me a pitying smile, as if I were a sentimental old fool who didn't understand the magnificent, brutal art of the deal. That night, I made a call to a man I knew in Antwerp. A disgraced artist, a genius with a grudge against the world that had dismissed him. A man who could replicate a 16th-century brushstroke, or the subtle patina of age with terrifying accuracy. "I have a commission for you," I'd said, my voice steady. "A private one. I need ghosts created." He understood immediately. For every masterpiece I cherished, he would craft its twin, its perfect, soulless echo. It took him a year of secret shipments, of late-night swaps in my vault, of me watching my partners circle my life's work like vultures. They thought they were planning a corporate coup. I was orchestrating a masterpiece of my own. The execution came 3 weeks after the last of the forgeries was in place. They called it an emergency board meeting. It felt more like an ambush. The conference room was cold, the air thick with manufactured gravity. Marcus stood by the window, arms crossed, a bulldog waiting to be unleashed. Genevieve sat at the head of the table, a slim, leather-bound folder placed perfectly square before her. She gestured for me to sit. "Elias, thank you for coming." Her voice was a symphony of false sympathy. I played my part. I looked confused, concerned. "What's this about? Is something wrong?" Genevieve's eyes met mine, cold and clear as ice. "We had an independent appraisal done, on your collection." Marcus turned from the window. "Not just an appraisal, Elias. A full authentication." He slid a tablet across the polished mahogany. On the screen was the face of Dr. Alistair Finch, a pompous academic from a second-tier university, a man whose opinion was notoriously available to the highest bidder. Finch's recorded voice droned on, dissecting my life's work with clinical disdain. Anomalous pigments in the Renaissance miniature, microfractures in the Faberge egg inconsistent with 19th century jewel craft, modern tooling marks on the flintlock pistols. He was describing the forgeries, of course, my artist's ghosts. Each flaw he pointed out was one I had paid to have put there. I let my face slacken with disbelief, with horror. I gripped the edge of the table. "This is absurd. Finch is a hack. I vetted every single piece myself. You know that." "We know you thought you did," Genevieve said softly, tapping the folder. "And that's the problem. Your passion, your enthusiasm, it's become a liability. You've been buying fakes, Elias. For years, you've exposed this company to catastrophic risk." Marcus pounced. "Risk? He's filled our vault with millions of dollars of junk. We're lucky we caught this before you bankrupted us." He threw a sheaf of papers onto the table. "A dissolution agreement. Our partnership has a gross negligence clause. We're invoking it." I stared at the pages, letting my hands tremble slightly. The terms were brutal. A buyout of my shares for pennies on the dollar, calculated against a collection now officially valued at near zero. They were erasing me, not just from the company, but from my own history. "You can't do this," I whispered, the words catching in my throat. "The sterling curio is my life." Genevieve leaned forward, her expression a perfect mask of pity. "We're protecting it, Elias, and in a way we're protecting you. We can't have it get out that our senior partner was so easily duped it would ruin the firm's reputation." "So what happens now?" I asked, looking from her face to Marcus's sneer. "Now," Marcus said, his voice dripping with finality, "we handle the mess. We'll auction the collection, brand it as a curiosity, a master forger's complete works. We'll spin a story, control the narrative. It minimizes the damage. As for you, you're going to sign those papers, take the pittance we're offering, and disappear." He slid a pen across the table. "Consider it a severance package for your silence." For a long moment I just looked at the pen. I let them see the fight drain out of me. I let them see the broken old man they believed me to be. Then, with a slow, defeated hand, I picked it up and signed away my life's work. As I slid the papers back to them, Genevieve's smile was the last thing I saw. A victor's smile. It was perfect. She had no idea she was just an actress in my play, and she had just delivered her lines flawlessly. I didn't move. Genevieve collected the signed pages, her movements crisp and efficient, stacking them into a neat pile. Marcus leaned against the wall, a smug grin plastered on his face. He expected me to shatter, to rage, to beg. The silence in the room stretched, becoming a weapon I now wielded against them. "Well," Marcus finally grunted, breaking the quiet. "That was easier than I thought." Genevieve shot him a warning glance before turning her professionally polished gaze back to me. "Is there anything else, Elias?" It wasn't a question, it was a dismissal. I let another moment pass, letting their discomfort curdle in the air. Then I looked up, meeting Genevieve's eyes directly. My voice, when it came, was devoid of the tremor they'd heard moments before. It was calm, measured. "Just one thing." Marcus snorted. "Don't push your luck, old man." I ignored him, my focus entirely on Genevieve, the true architect of this betrayal. In my office, on the wall behind the desk, there is a small framed botanical print of a night-blooming cereus. It has no real value. It was a gift from my father. I'd like to take it with me. Genevieve considered this a final, petty power play. She could have said no just to twist the knife, but a flicker of something, perhaps unease at my composure, made her relent. She gave a magnanimous little nod, a gesture of pity for the broken man. "Of course, Elias. Take your memento." I rose from the chair, not with the weary slump of defeat, but with a straight spine. I walked past them without another word. I could feel their eyes on my back as I went to my office. The space already felt alien, stripped of my presence. The print was there, exactly as I'd described. I lifted it from its hook. The frame was cool in my hands. Tucked behind the cheap paper backing was a micro SD card containing every ounce of their financial misconduct, every secret deal, every off-the-books transaction I had been quietly documenting for the past year. I walked out, carrying the print. I passed our junior associates, their faces a mixture of pity and fear. They averted their eyes. They thought they were witnessing the end of Elias Vance. As the heavy glass doors of the Sterling Curio hissed shut behind me, the cold Boston air felt like a baptism. I stopped on the sidewalk, looking up at the name carved in the granite facade. My name. A slow, cold smile finally touched my lips. They hadn't protected the firm from a liability. They had just handed me the detonator. I didn't go home. Home was a sanctuary, and this was not a time for sanctuary. This was a time for war. I drove not to my quiet brownstone in Beacon Hill, but to a nondescript, high-end residential hotel in the Seaport District. A place of glass, steel, and anonymity. I had leased a small suite here 6 months ago under a corporate pseudonym, paying in cash. A ghost's retreat. Inside, the suite was sparse, clinical. A desk, a powerful laptop, and a single bottle of 20-year-old Pappy Van Winkle I'd been saving. Not for a celebration, but for a declaration. I poured 2 fingers into a heavy crystal tumbler, the amber liquid catching the cold light from the floor-to-ceiling window. Boston spread out below me, a glittering chessboard. I took the micro SD card from behind the botanical print. Slotting it into a reader, I brought up the labyrinth of files I had spent a year building. It was a digital map of their greed, charting every secret commission, every inflated invoice, every undeclared sale. But you don't burn down a forest by lighting the whole thing at once. You start with a single, perfectly placed spark. My finger hovered over a folder labeled The Devereaux Acquisition. It was Genevieve's masterpiece of a deal from 8 months prior, a collection of impressionist sketches from a reclusive French heir. Marcus had been insufferably proud of muscling out Sotheby's for it. Genevieve had handled the delicate financial footwork, praised for her discretion and skill. I opened a subfolder. Inside were wire transfer confirmations and encrypted emails between Genevieve and a shell corporation in the Cayman Islands named Artifice Holdings. My dear Genevieve, the artist of the deal, had been skimming. Not a huge amount, just a tidy 6% off the top, rerouted through Artifice before the final payment was made to the seller. It was a masterpiece of untraceable theft. Untraceable to a bulldog like Marcus, but not to an architect who knows where all the secret passages are built. This was my spark. It wouldn't just burn Genevieve, it would douse Marcus in the gasoline of humiliation. He would see that the viper he'd allied with had bitten him too. I picked up a burner phone. I had one contact in my address book. Isabel Chen, Izzy, the sharpest, most feared investigative journalist at the Financial Chronicle. She didn't just report the news, she made markets tremble. I keyed in the number. She answered on the second ring, her voice clipped and impatient. Chen. Miss Chen, my name is Elias Vance. I was, until about 3 hours ago, the senior partner at the Sterling Curio. There was a pause. I could hear the faint click of a keyboard. I know who you are, Mr. Vance. I just read the press release, stepping down to pursue other interests. Sounds like you were pushed off a cliff. A more accurate metaphor than you know, I said, my voice even. I'm not calling for a sympathetic ear. I'm calling to offer you the story behind the press release. A story of financial malfeasance that goes to the very heart of the antiquities market. I get calls like this every day, Mr. Vance. Disgruntled employees with an axe to grind. Her skepticism was a tangible thing. Do they usually come with irrefutable proof? I asked. I sent a single, heavily redacted document to her encrypted email address as I spoke. A single wire transfer from the Sterling Curio to Artifice Holdings. Check the timestamp on that transfer. Then check the announcement of the Devereaux acquisition. You'll find they coincide nicely. The silence on the line was different now. It was the sound of a predator catching a scent. This is thin. It's a thread. I corrected her. I'm offering you the chance to be the one who pulls it. Meet me. 1 hour. The corner table at the back of the Marley Ave. If you're not interested after 5 minutes, I'll pay for your drink, and you'll never hear from me again. I hung up before she could answer. The Marley Ave was an old Boston institution, dark wood and low light, a place for secrets. I was there first. Izzy arrived exactly 1 hour later. She was younger than I'd pictured, with sharp, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. She slid into the booth without a word, placing her phone face down on the table. 5 minutes, Mr. Vance. Start the clock. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I slid a tablet across the table, open to the Artifice Holdings folder. The unredacted bank statements. The incorporation papers listing a proxy director with known ties to Genevieve's family lawyer. The internal emails, forwarded from my old account, where Genevieve subtly altered payment instructions, citing international transfer protocols. Izzy's eyes scanned the screen, her expression unreadable. She swiped, read, and absorbed the information with a terrifying speed. The 5 minutes came and went. She didn't move. Finally, she looked up, her gaze pinning me. This is dynamite. Why give it to me? Why not just go to the authorities? Or to Marcus? Because Marcus is a blunt instrument, and the authorities are a slow one. I'm not interested in justice, Miss Chen. I'm interested in a reckoning, I said, my voice low and cold. This is just the first act. Genevieve will be exposed as a thief, and Marcus will be revealed as the fool who let it happen right under his nose. Their alliance will fracture. And you will have the exclusive story as I dismantle the rest of their world, piece by piece. A slow smile, sharp as a shard of glass, touched her lips. You provide the ammunition, I fire the shots. Is that the arrangement? That is the arrangement, I confirmed. There's much more, but for now, Artifice Holdings is yours. Run with it. She nodded once, a crisp, decisive movement. She stood up, leaving her untouched drink on the table. You'll be hearing from me, Mr. Vance. I stayed in the booth long after she left, finishing my drink. 2 hours later, back in the sterile quiet of my hotel suite, my phone buzzed. It was a news alert from the Financial Chronicle. The headline was a thing of brutal beauty. Asterisk, Sterling Curio partner linked to offshore Shell Corp in Devereaux acquisition scandal. Asterisk, I clicked the link. Izzy's article was a masterpiece of surgical destruction, laying out the facts with cold, undeniable precision. It didn't speculate, it stated. It didn't accuse, it presented evidence. I walked to the window, looking out at the city lights below. The trap had been sprung. The first tremor was shaking their gilded cage. My burner phone rang. The caller ID was blocked. It was my mole, a young archivist named Leo, whom I'd mentored for years, a boy with a fierce loyalty that Marcus and Genevieve had mistaken for meekness. "Mr. Vance," his voice was a hushed, frantic whisper. "It's pandemonium?" I let the silence hang, prompting him. "Marcus saw the article an hour ago. He stormed into Genevieve's office. He didn't even close the door. I think the whole floor heard him." "What did he say, Leo?" I asked, my voice calm, a stark contrast to his panic. "He was screaming. He threw his tablet against the wall. He kept yelling, 'Artifice Holdings? What the hell is Artifice Holdings?'" I could picture it perfectly. Marcus, red-faced and sputtering, his brutish control shattered. Genevieve, backed into a corner, her mask of composure cracking under the assault. She tried to deny it. Leo continued, his words tumbling out. "She said it was a fabrication, a hit piece from a competitor. She called it corporate espionage. But Marcus wasn't buying it. He shouted, 'This has your fingerprints all over it, you snake! While I was building this company, you were drilling holes in the hull.' A perfect metaphor from such an imperfect man." "And then?" I prompted. She fired back. She told him he was a fool, that he never looked past the initial figures of any deal. She said, "If you had half a brain for anything other than bullying clients, you'd have seen this yourself." Then she said the worst thing. She told him his father was right about him. A direct hit. Marcus's greatest insecurity was his desperate need to prove himself to the family, whose money he wielded like a club. He went silent, Leo whispered, completely white. Then he just pointed at the door and said, "Get out, we're done. She's clearing her desk now, the lawyers are on their way." "Thank you, Leo, stay quiet. You'll be rewarded for your loyalty." I ended the call. It was happening faster than I'd anticipated. Their alliance, forged in greed, had dissolved in paranoia at the first sign of pressure. Just as I knew it would. Genevieve was the brains, but Marcus held the power of the purse strings. Without him, she was nothing. And now, he was alone, wounded and bleeding in the water. Time for the second shark to arrive. I opened another folder on my laptop, this one labeled The Rotterdam Consolidation. It was Marcus's pet project from last year. He'd consolidated a shipment of Dutch antiquities through the port, a logistical nightmare he'd claimed to have solved through sheer genius. The truth was far simpler and far dirtier. He'd bribed a port official, a man with a gambling problem, to misclassify the entire container, avoiding nearly $1 million in import duties and tariffs. It was a clumsy, brutish crime, classic Marcus. But the real beauty of it was the source of the bribe money. He hadn't used his own funds. He'd pulled it from a dormant client escrow account belonging to the estate of a Mrs. Eleanor Vance, my mother. He had stolen from my family's legacy to fund his cheap grift. He thought the account was forgotten, a dusty corner of the books no one would ever check. But I checked. I always checked. I packaged the evidence, the wire transfer to the port official's brother-in-law in Curaçao, the falsified customs declarations bearing Marcus's signature, and the internal memo from the escrow account. It was a neat, undeniable little parcel of self-destruction. I called Izzy. She answered immediately. "Chen." "Act 2, I said simply. "That was fast. Your partners are imploding." There was a note of professional admiration in her voice. "What do you have for me now?" "Something for your front page," I said. "Genevieve was a thief. Marcus is a common criminal. He used my mother's estate funds to bribe a customs official." The silence on the line was profound. Even for a hardened journalist like Izzy, this was a new level of sordid. "Send it," she finally said, her voice tight. I hit the enter key. "Consider it sent. The story isn't just about offshore accounts anymore, Miss Chen. It's about rot, the complete and utter rot at the heart of the sterling curio, and it's all about to be carved out." I hung up and walked back to the window. Genevieve was a viper, now defanged and cast out. Marcus was a bulldog, now rabid and alone, about to be publicly disgraced. They thought they were the perfect team. They never realized they were just two different kinds of predator locked in the same cage. And I was the one who had just thrown in the meat. The new headline hit the internet like a lightning strike. Izzy had outdone herself. Asterix, sterling curio in freefall. partner accused of bribery, embezzlement from founder's family estate. Asterisk. The story was a clinical evisceration. It didn't just ruin Marcus professionally, it branded him a ghoul who preyed on the dead. My phone rang less than 10 minutes later. It was Marcus, calling from his private line. I let it ring 3 times before answering. I said nothing. "You," he rasped, his voice a ragged ruin. "This was you." "I merely provided Miss Chen with the facts," I replied, my tone as cool and clean as the glass in my hand. "The facts of what you did with my mother's money." A choked sound, half sob, half rage, came through the speaker. "You destroyed everything. The company, my reputation, everything. For what? Revenge over a pile of worthless junk?" The opening. He had given me the perfect opening. I let a beat of silence stretch, imagining him on the other end, a cornered animal, his world collapsing into rubble. "You still don't understand, do you, Marcus?" My voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of a tombstone. "You never understood what was valuable. You saw history, legacy, my life's work, and you saw only an asset to be liquidated. You saw my mother's name on an account and saw only an opportunity for a cheap grift. I'll sue you, slander, You'll do nothing," I cut in, my voice dropping to a whisper of steel, "because you are nothing. A thug in a tailored suit who was too blind to see the difference between treasure and trash. You sold your soul for a quick profit, Marcus. The tragedy is, you got a terrible price for it." I paused, letting the final truth settle over him. "You didn't sell my collection. You sold the story you and Genevieve wanted to believe, a story about a foolish old man, but the real punchline is just about to be delivered." I ended the call. His ruin was complete. But my masterpiece was not. The world believed my collection was a fraud, sold for pennies on the dollar. They had mourned my fall from grace. It was time for my resurrection, and for the world to see what true value really looked like. So I need your opinion on this. Should I ever tell them they only got the fakes? Or is the better revenge letting them believe they sold my real priceless collection for practically nothing?